back to EcoCycle's Zero Waste video series. Last week we talked about why recycling is important, and this week we're going to talk about what can be recycled. Did you know that what I can recycle in my curbside bin here in Boulder County might be different from what someone can recycle in Austin, Texas, or even in nearby Denver? That's because recycling guidelines change from place to place. So why aren't recycling practices the same everywhere we go? Can't we just make universal recycling guidelines for what can be recycled and put universal recycling signage on recycling bins and put a universal symbol on all recyclable containers? Problem solved, right? Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Whether something is recyclable does change from community to community, and that's because what is or isn't recyclable in your area depends on three things. 1, is there a local facility that can process that material? 2, is there a dependable, accessible market for the material? And 3, will that market pay enough for the material to cover the costs of collecting, processing, and transporting it? Let's take a closer look at each of these factors. 1, local facilities. This refers to the actual recycling facility and the sorting equipment and technology that it may or may not have. It also refers to the infrastructure involved in recycling collection. So if we're talking about recycling a plastic bottle, for example, we need to think about, do we have trucks to collect the bottles, or do we have a drop-off center where people bring their bottles? How far away is the nearest recycling center that processes recyclables for market? If it's many miles away in another part of the state, that carries a significant additional financial burden for the program, which is a huge issue for rural communities. At that recycling center, do they have an economically feasible way to sort number 1 bottles from number 2 jugs and separate them from all the other materials? For example, do they have lasers or hand sorters? Now let's turn to markets. It's one thing for us to be able to collect and sort recyclables, but then someone has to actually buy them to physically turn them into something new. Whoever is buying that material from the recycler is called the market. And that brings us to criteria number 3, the market's value of a recyclable. There are, of course, costs involved in collecting the material, sorting it at a facility, and shipping the material to the market to make it into something new. The market needs to be paying a price for recyclable materials that will cover those costs and have at least some profit margin for the recycler. These 3 things vary widely from place to place, and that's why recycling guidelines are different from place to place. And that's why the concept of creating universal recycling guidelines isn't possible right now. There are some general commonalities around the materials accepted in a community if they have recycling services. Most programs, even if they're very rural, will accept aluminum cans, steel cans, and corrugated cardboard. That's because these materials are usually valuable enough to pay for themselves. The closer you are to a large city, the more materials are added to that basic list. So, how do you know what's recyclable for you? Knowing what is or isn't recyclable where you live is extra confusing because of the prolific use of the recycling symbol on so much packaging out there. Much of it is stuff that isn't really recyclable anywhere. For example, you'll find the recycling symbol on almost all plastics, but actually, most plastics out there aren't recyclable. Right now, we can't control who puts the recycling symbol on their product. And as we've learned, recycling guidelines change from place to place. So if I have a yogurt tub and I'm looking for a label to tell me whether or not it's recyclable, that yogurt tub doesn't know whether I'm in Boulder County or rural Australia. So while it may be recyclable here, that doesn't mean it's recyclable everywhere. So the best way to know what's recyclable in your area isn't to look to the product to tell you. You should look to your local guidelines from your hauler, your local recycler, or your community's government. If you live and recycle in Denver, here's the basics of our recycling guidelines. Let's start with paper. Here are some paper items you can recycle in Denver: cardboard, paperboard, office paper, and unopened junk mail, magazines, newspaper, and coffee cups. We don't want low-grade papers like paper towels, tissues, and napkins, beater-dyed paper, very bright or very dark paper, food packaging except cartons, and paper smaller than 2 inches like shred. Some non-plastic containers recyclable in Denver include cartons, aluminum drink cans, steel food cans, and glass bottles and jars. The caps on the cartons can stay on. Please take the jar lids off. Labels are okay on all of these containers. Please make sure that they're all empty of food and liquid. We can also recycle some plastic containers in Denver, which includes bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. You can keep the screw-on caps on these containers as long as it's plastic on plastic. We can also take clamshells and takeout containers as long as they're not compostable, plastic-lined paper, or polystyrene. We can also take tub lids by themselves in Denver. Again, please make sure that all of these containers are empty of food and liquid. If you have any questions on what to recycle in Denver, visit the City of Denver government website or download the Denver Recycles app. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
Good morning, I'm Denver City Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer, and I'm here today because it's Sunday morning, which is the day that my family cleans our house. And we're having a conversation about things we find in our garbage that should be recycled, but aren't being recycled. So this morning, when my family went to clean up all of our garbage, what we discovered is that we're not recycling things that could be recycled. When I was looking through my family's trash this morning, here's what we discovered. A can. This is easily recyclable. It goes on in. A box, easily recyclable. It goes on in. Another box. Here's a question for you. Is a chip bag recyclable? The answer to that question is no. It goes in the garbage. Here's something for you. So here we have a broken electronic. This doesn't go either in the garbage or recycling. This should go in an electronic box that you keep in your garage. The City of Denver will have an electronic take back day. Regular plastic, I think we know, not recyclable. Here's a question for you. This is plastic. It should be recyclable, but is it? It's not. You need to throw it in the landfill, unfortunately. Another chip bag. Things like Kleenex boxes. These things we can recycle. So as you can see, there's plenty of stuff in your garbage that you could be recycling if you just take a little bit of effort. My family makes that mistake, obviously, all the time because this is really our Sunday morning garbage. So a little bit more thought into it, you can make a little bit more effort, and then that stuff doesn't end up going to the landfill. Thanks so much for thinking about it. I really appreciate your time. I'm Denver City Councilwoman Amanda Sawyer. Thanks for your time and have a great day.